to In Bed With. I'm Dr. Cheri Mah, and I'm so excited to be here today with Alexi Pappas. So first, Alexi, I want to ask you, how did you sleep last night?
Can I be honest?
Yes.
Well, so I slept in a hotel last night, and for some reason, the first night in hotels can be really hard for me. So I did sleep, and I slept well when I was asleep, but it took me longer than it does at home to fall asleep.
It's a known phenomenon called the first night effect.
Oh, really?
Yes, you sleep worse typically when you're in a new environment versus when you're in your home environment where it's consistent and reliable. So it's a very known phenomenon where part of your brain actually doesn't sleep as well as it would typically and is more active than when you're at home.
That's wild. I always wonder, like, should I bring my pillow? Like, how do I recreate the place that I sleep the best?
You're on to exactly what I would recommend. You want to create an environment that's familiar. So the things that you can bring from home, whether it's a picture, a candle, a pillowcase, if you have like a bed partner, and so they have that scent. So the more familiar you can make it, it's almost trying to acclimate your brain to know that this is a safe environment, that it is similar to when you're at home, so you will be able to sleep better on that first night away.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like the pillowcase idea.
Yeah.
That's like,
You can give that a shot too.
yeah.
Shifting gears back a little bit, when did sleep start to matter to you?
I sometimes would have nightmares like when I was little, and I think one of the things my dad did that was so smart, and I don't know how conscious he is of this, but when I couldn't sleep as a kid, I would like go to his room and be like, I can't sleep, and he would just go like, just try. Like he never freaked out, and he also never overly helped me sleep. He was like present. Sometimes he would stand in the doorway when I couldn't fall asleep for a little bit, and then I think I would fall asleep. And so I think he taught me to develop my own relationship with sleep on my own very young. But I feel like it's been important since I can remember. And it never felt like medicine to me.
Like it wasn't prescriptive in a way, like you felt like you had a good relationship and knowing how to make this a part of your day today.
Yeah. And which is another thing I do attribute to my dad. He didn't really, I don't think he created polarizing language of like good for you, bad for you, healthy, unhealthy. He just, I think, led by example and I think helped me zoom out to like bigger dreams, and that dictated what my habits were, you know?
It's great to have someone that can support that and provide some guidance.
Yeah.
So I'm curious now, like fast forward a little bit more towards your adult life or maybe at the collegiate level leading up into the Olympics, like can you share with me what the role of sleep was or still is at this point?
I think sleep is one of those things that you don't know how good it feels to be well rested until you are. So when you don't feel great, there's all this like, there's things you can do to artificially boost yourself, right? There's coffee, there's music, like there's so many ways to feel good enough to get it done. But I think what I was experiencing in my first few years of college that I shifted in my second few years was I was like barely hanging on. I thought running was so hard and school was so hard, to actually some of my habits need to shift, and this doesn't need to feel as hard as it feels. I mean, I think about it like when you're playing pinball, you know how there's the launch, the
Right,
launch.
yeah, the one you pull back.
Yeah, the one you pull back.
Yeah.
You don't sleep enough, and you're barely pulling it back, and you're still trying to get that marble to go and do all the chaos that it does. And I think I felt like I had to draw from like a deeper reserve. So it wasn't as fun physically. It led to eventual injuries after the Olympics because I was trying to run 100 miles a week at 8,000 feet altitude with 1 hour of sleep a night. That I did that for months, and then I tore my hamstring, which was the first major injury of my life. I'd never been injured up until that point, and I'd also had a really good sleep habit up until that point in my life.
I loved your analogy of that pinball machine, which it's just not recoiling as powerfully and strongly and robustly as it could, right? Or you're not filling your gas tank as much as it could be if you actually gave that priority and had the sufficient, not just duration, but probably quality and timing as well.
Yeah. And it's not that cool sometimes at points in your life to be someone who likes sleep. Like, I've definitely felt like a weird, odd one out when I was like, people in their 20s are not sleeping as much. And I remember like needing the sleep and feeling like a little bit like I had to like, not like I was lame, but it wasn't like the cool thing then. I think now it's cooler. Okay, I called my naps meetings, and that was the only way I felt like I didn't have to tell people.
Justify what you were
Yeah,
doing.
to not have
and
to
that-
justify the nap.
Out of curiosity, is there specific races where you slept really well leading up to it, or were there other ones where you definitely, were in the hole and not getting enough rest, and you think that may have played a role in how you performed? I'm curious on your thoughts of looking back at some of those races and how sleep had that place.
Many runners, at least, will tell you that they don't sleep the night before a race very well because you wake up early, you're antsy the night
Yeah, we know
before. Yeah, you're excited. And the 2 nights out is actually like the focus for the sleep. And I have always been a real champion when it comes to sleeping 2 nights out before the race. So much so that I'll sleep like 14 hours for a big race. And that's what I would do is I would know that 2 nights out, I'm going to go to bed at like, try to get in bed at 7 and sleep in with no alarm. And I remember there was a race in Maine, and it was my first 10K ever. It was on the road, and I slept, like 14 and a half hours. Yeah, and we had host families, and maybe that's why I slept so well, because it wasn't a hotel. It was a host family, so it was a real
In a
like
more
yeah.
homey environment.
Well, it felt very at home, right? I ate a home cooked meal, slept 14 and a half hours, and ran like incredibly. And it was my first 10K, which was my Olympic event eventually. And that was a night that I slept really, really well and ran really, really well. And on the other hand, there was this race I remember that was this big relay race from LA to Las Vegas. And this was actually the first non like Olympic style race I'd ever done. It was this ultra marathon, anything over a marathon.
Yes.
A lot of miles to Vegas. And I was nervous and didn't sleep that well because I didn't know what the world would think about me doing this sort of non-hyper competitive race, but this more fun relay. And it was a 24-hour race, so I couldn't sleep the next night.
Insane.
Yeah, and I remember we were, just running through the night and doing many legs of a relay, and I was like, man, all I want to do is get a good night's sleep. And it was a few days before I got that, but it did affect me.
Yeah, I think it's so important to plan ahead, not just those 2 days, but I always recommend to my athletes, like, it's what you did the whole week up to the race, or it's what you've done the whole month, or actually, honestly, the whole season to get you to the point where we have that solid foundation under you, because that's what you can lean on when we know there might be a night before a race or competition where you're not going to get the best sleep, and you're still going to perform well, probably great, but then if you have that foundation built under you, you're going to give yourself an even better chance. I want to hear a little bit about the Olympics and how sleep played a role in how you prepared and then were there in Olympic Village and then obviously afterwards. But let's start with just the travel component.
So my Olympics was in South America in Rio, and it was a long travel, right? Like I feel like it was over 30 hours. And my competition day for the 10K was on day 1 of track and field, which meant that I got there early. So I got there 12 days before my race. And I remember deciding I'm going to stay this whole month and I'm going to make it my new home. And that was really fun because you get to kind of like set up your room and like actually unpack and figure out your way through the village and figure out your dynamic with your roommates. So you have roommates, you have floor mates, you have country mates, you have other countries. So like you are suddenly moving in to a worldly like college dorm is what it feels like. And I remember meeting my roommates and suddenly realizing that we had completely opposite sleep schedules.
Oh no.
Yes. So I brought and thankfully was able to use my earplugs. Like that's a little thing, but like I did need to learn how to like shut out the beauty and chaos of the Olympics. But another thing I will say that I think is wisdom that I have used for everything in my life is I remember I got this advice from my coach. He was an Olympian. He said, Alexi, the Olympics is chaos. It is going to throw you this way, throw you that way. You know, the toilet paper is going to run out, something's going to break, right? And all these things did happen. And he said, you can use the chaos as a reason why you're not going to do well, because this isn't a sterile environment. It's not what you expect. It's not what you know. Or you can decide that it's why you are going to do well and that this is a special and different experience. And I took every single unexpected hurdle and challenge as a reason why this was a different moment and why it was going to be different in all the right ways. And I think that's why I ran a national record, why I ran a personal best. And I also was able to give that advice. I remember to Cole Hawker before the Paris Olympics, and he won gold. And he said that advice really helped him because no Olympics is a controlled environment. And that came down to sleep. It came down to social dynamics and everything.
When you used your tools in Olympic Village, did you sleep well during that lead up to your race?
Yeah, I slept well. And I did try to lay down and nap every day. Like, I think one of the things that helped me the most was trying to keep the routine, even if the quality scaled, and that even applies to training. So I'm used to running twice a day. You're not running twice a day 5 days before the biggest race of your life, but my coach still had me go outside for the second run of the day and go for a 10-minute walk because he wanted my body to feel that sense of rhythm.
Do you think that really helped you just in your mindset then of preparation for Olympics and then when you were there?
Yeah, it was, I saw it all as like really, really beautiful. Yeah. Like I really felt present, and I spent a lot of time alone in the village. And I think that's another thing was trying to be more observant, because this was like the whole world was here, the best athletes in the whole world at that time, people I would maybe never get to meet again, sports that may never even come back to the Olympics. Remember, some sports get phased out. Like it's such a lightning in a bottle moment. And so I tried to be really, really present, and I think that that helped me stay calm. I think it helped me like have a sense of wonder about it all, and it helped reduce stress.
How was it after the race? Is there a rebound on your sleep or kind of a different pattern once you've obviously had this very intense race?
Yeah, this is where I feel like it's not like embarrassed, but I was 26, and maybe everyone has to learn this for real and the hard way. But when you do something you've never done before, there's this sense of like not wanting to lose momentum. And it's the most momentum you've ever had. You just ran the best you've ever run on the world stage. It couldn't have gone better. And I remember thinking, I need to keep this going. After having only thought about this one thing for my whole life, I didn't think past the Olympics. So when you get to the moment after, you've never thought about that moment because you would probably not get there in the first place. So when it happens, you're like deer in the headlights, if you were me at least. And I started to feel this like fear. And when I started to feel sad, I was like, no, because I did not want to go there. And so my reaction was to be happy and keep going. And that's what started this whole cycle of starting to have anxiety, starting to train more but sleep less. And that kind of, you know, started the day after.
Literally the day after your race.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember the anxiety of like, I can't stop. Like everyone else is gonna stop and I'm not gonna stop. What a silly thing to genuinely feel, you know? Like I didn't get drunk like the day after. You know what I mean?
I hope you
like,
had some enjoyment
I did.
the time that you were in Olympic Village in Post.
I had a blast.
Yeah.
I had a blast. I just didn't slow down as much as I would have. and as much as I do now when I have like a really big peak in my life.
You've recognized that as a specific time point that is obviously very influential, and it sounds like that affects now how you approach your sleep and other aspects.
Yeah, I think that I see sleep as it's the time to actually absorb the enormity of your day and the enormity of a chapter of your life, right? Like, and it's a time to like dream. Like I like dreaming. I do like it.
I think you touched on an interesting point about like sleep and kind of your mental approach or your mental health. And I know you've talked about before, like, your brain is a body part. Can you kind of explain a little bit more what that means and how you see that relationship between mental health and sleep?
Well, it has helped me a lot because, there are periods of time where I feel better or worse. It doesn't have to be so intense as it was after the Olympics, but you have good days and bad days. And to try to know or to tell myself, okay, what would I do if this was like a pain in my body? And then take action that way has helped me so much. Like if I'm having a really bad mental day, I can't force the feelings to change, but I can pay attention to my actions, which is what I would
Which
do.
influence each other, right?
Yeah, I was always taught your actions change, then your thoughts, then your feelings in that ordering. So if you don't feel great, what are the actions that might help you get there? Which for me, sleep is a huge one, right? You know what? I had a friend. Can I tell you this thing that my friend?
Yes, I wanna hear.
My friend told me that his dad, he would call his dad when he had a bad day, and his dad would ask him if he had his basics. And I was like, okay, what's that? And he said, everybody has a set of basics that if something feels off, you need to make sure you have your basics before you even ask a bigger question of like, what's going on here? And so for me, my basics are, did I get a good night's sleep? Did I get a really good like set of meals? And have I run? And if one of those questions is not satisfied, before I spin out and I'm like, is something like crazy off or something really, really wrong?
Yeah, you can pinpoint.
Well, I need to go to those things first
Yeah.
and get a good night's sleep, get some great food, and go on a run. And chances are some of those mental challenges will solve just by taking care of your basics.
So, Alexi, tell me about what does it mean to get a good night of sleep for you?
A good night's sleep. I mean, for me, if I can take like an Epsom salt bath before bed, I'm always going to sleep the best. And I'm someone who likes sleeping with wet hair. I know that's controversial. I like it. I think that has to do with the cool feeling. A good night's sleep looks like 9 hours if I can or more. And going to bed before 10, I always feel better. And waking up without an alarm is always the dream. Like it really is. And I knew some Olympic teammates before me that gave me the advice to try to go to bed early enough that I would likely wake up before the alarm. That's aspirational, but I try to do that, like to go to bed early enough that I probably will wake up that early. And then the next day, everything feels better. Like everything from my presence to the way my body is interacting with the ground as a runner, to how I reflect on things and make decisions. Yeah, everything is better.
I like how you've identified there's the sleep duration component that you've said, 9 hours is what you're targeting. There's the quality factors that you're saying. I think those are so important because so many people focus on just duration alone and don't really put as much emphasis around so many factors throughout your day that can affect the quality of your sleep, or things like your environment and that wind down routine, those hours before you're going to sleep can also really affect that quality. You also talked earlier a bit about sleep extension, and that's personally, it's what I've researched a fair amount, trying to look at like how can we help athletes enhance their performance through sleep.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a coach telling me that if I could sleep one more hour or more a night than was average, it would be like I was sleeping 8 nights a week. And he was like, how awesome would that be? And I was like, that sounds awesome. when I do get enough sleep in the way that you're talking about, the things that recover for me go beyond the basic needs of my sport. My skin improves. That's what I mean. It's like my nails are better, my hair is better.
Life is better.
Life is better, but also the things that are the extra things that don't directly contribute to me crossing the finish line first improve. And that's when I'm really, really doing my best.
Yeah.
And if you're going to make a trade for sleep, right?
Is that your recommendation
Yeah.
for folks? Okay, so
Yeah.
you're saying if it's 1 extra hour training,
Yes,
or
no.
working out,
Sleep.
or that would be
100%.
I love it.
Yeah, if you can make that trade and get sleep in your circle, do that.
Are those times that you've done that? You've said, hey,
100%.
I'm going to not train today, or I'm going to take that extra hour in the gym and give myself an hour additional recovery sleep time. Has that happened before?
Yeah, because we're hard on ourselves and we have these boxes we want to tick. And the sleep one, I think people are championing it more and more. Like there is more, with a lot of these devices celebrating sleep, it gives more of that reward. But I would say that working hard tends to be the thing that we give the shiny star for. And it should be sleep. Yeah.
I know your father, you've shared, has sleep apnea and uses a CPAP as his management for this sleep disordered breathing condition. Can you tell me more about what your experience was like having a dad with sleep apnea?
Well, when you travel with a dad with sleep apnea, it's hard for you to sleep. I guess that's like a really kind, diplomatic way to say that he was like waking up a lot and snoring a lot, and not when he didn't get great sleep and we were, in close proximity, it meant I didn't get great sleep. And I just thought it was normal because it was all I ever knew from him until he got really, really regimented with his sleep apnea tools, and now has the one at home, the travel device, and I think it's improved his life, but it definitely has improved everybody around him too.
Did it take him a while to get evaluated and get to the place where he recognized that this was an issue?
Yeah, I think there was some like peer pressure from with this
From you?
from the family.
From the family, yeah.
I think the hardest part for him might have been incorporating it into his actual routine, right? Which is so common for all of us when we have like a new thing in our life. But now I can see that it is like it's in his habit, it's in his subconscious. This is what he does, like brushing your teeth, you know? But I think it took some education and onboarding and finding comfortable enough, products that he was sleeping in a way that felt, good to him.
I'm curious if you have any thoughts about what specifically in the daytime was impacted once he started CPAP treatment from, you mentioned alertness, but are there other things that you saw a difference?
Yeah. So all of his like health biomarkers improved because I think sleep was probably a huge contributor to all of these other things that he was dealing with. And so that was a big one, which is the part that scares me the most. Obviously, you just want your parents healthy. He has become more active, so like more golf, and he works in renewable energy, and he's a very like sharp mind, and I think it's like allowed him to maintain his like his sharpness at work. He like works with people much younger than him, and he's kind of this leader, and I can see that he feels very, very able to keep up with the pace of like a very vibrant group of people. So I'm happy to see that. And I also just think he's less self-conscious because you don't like want to be someone with sleep apnea. You want to be able to help yourself. And so to have tools where like he has his teammate with him and he can take care of himself is probably a good feeling too.
Do you have advice for folks who either are struggling with sleep or may think that they might have sleep apnea, and just curious on from your experience having a family member?
Yeah, I think if we want to help anyone with anything, we want to like remind ourselves we're here to help them. And so with that comes a sense of needing to understand like, who am I to this person, right? I'm not a doctor, so I can't tell my dad, you need this or you need that. but I can observe in him something that I hope for him, which is to like sleep through the night. And I think the way that I was able to help him and the family was just to like gently encourage him to like talk to the people who could help him.
The reality of sleep apnea is so common, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm learning.
It's about 26% is the estimated prevalence for adults between the age of 30 and 70. So that's huge. That's almost, 1 in 4 individuals in, the general public that likely have obstructive sleep apnea, but may not be at a place where they've either recognized that they have symptoms or have sought help. So,
Wow. Can I ask you a crazy question?
Okay.
Could I have it if I'm like a healthy Olympian?
yes.
I could have it.
The reality is, yes, you can.
Wow.
You as a fit woman that's still younger, you can still have predisposition for apnea. So it's just something to be mindful of as you go through your life, that if there are symptoms that are concerning, that you get evaluated and talk with a provider.
Okay. Like, okay.
Well, shifting gears a bit, I
Yeah.
want to talk about, the Olympics 2016 was 10 years ago. I would love to hear how sleep is now.
Sleep is still really, really important to me. There are times when I don't get enough and I feel it. And so I think as I progress, I continue to like run a lot and have found that the non-negotiable is still sleep.
Do you feel like the creative side of your projects now are impacted differently than when you were an athlete and thinking about how sleep was affecting your physical performance?
No, I actually think that sleep is just as important for writing, directing, for any big dream, creative or otherwise, as it is for athletics. I think you feel it really acutely in sport, but I feel it when I sit down to write. If I haven't slept, there's like a barrier between myself and the like flow subconscious place you want to get when you're writing. It's just as important.